This recording on installing Portworx on Amazon EKS. Today I'll be showing you how to install Portworx on top of EKS and get your Kubernetes cluster with Portworx up and running. For that I'll be using the Portworx documentation, and obviously we're installing on Amazon and then specifically EKS. I'll be using the Portworx Operator since the operator makes it really simple to install Portworx, but it also allows you to do upgrades and maintains the Portworx installation in the future, so making it very easy to maintain. Obviously, to get started, we first need a EKS cluster. So I've already prepared that on the Amazon side. I have this cluster called pxdeploy EKS1. It's running Kubernetes 120. It contains 3 worker nodes and was just created and is in a healthy state as we go right now. Good. So let's get started on the documentation. Here we go. So the first part is we need to allow Portworx to create EBS volumes. So these worker nodes that we currently have here only have a volume for its operating system, but we want to attach additional volumes to those worker nodes as well, basically to allow Portworx to create the software-defined storage pool on top of that. So for that, we need to attach a role to the node group, basically. So what I've done here is that I have added the permissions as listed here, basically attaching volume, modifying volume, create volume, those kind of things. I've attached those to this node group as such, right? So here we have the permissions to allow the EKS cluster to reach out to Amazon, create volumes, attach volumes, those kind of things. So now that those permissions are in place for my EKS cluster, I can basically start with the deployment of Kubernetes. So next step is we need to install the operator on our cluster. But I'll get back to that in just a second. I'll just go ahead and click on this link to open PX Central to basically define our Portworx configuration. For this install, I'm installing Portworx Enterprise. So I'll just select that one and go ahead. As I said, I'll be using the Portworx Operator, installing Portworx 2.8. As this is a standalone version of Portworx, I can use the internal etcd database. Now, if you would be running a Metro environment, you'd probably want to use an external database, but for now, that's not required. In the next step, I'm using the cloud integration with AWS to basically make sure that we reach out to the AWS environment to create our storage volumes for my worker nodes. I can select the performance types. For me, GP2 is fine, and I'll just use a 170 gigabyte size for those drives. If you wanted to, you could add multiple drives to run more volumes to those systems. In my case, 1 drive will be sufficient. So I'll go ahead, I'll accept the default networking configuration, and here I'll select Amazon EKS as my platform. Finally, in the advanced session, I'll enable telemetry and I'll give my cluster a name called pxdeploy, why not? And then finally, I will finish the implementation. I'll agree to the license terms. And this is why I didn't do the operator before, because actually here it says the command to install the operator, and then it also allows us to deploy Portworx. So let's first install the operator. For that, I already opened 2 terminals. If I just to make sure that we are running the same thing, let me quickly show my EKS cluster. EKS cuddle get cluster in region EU West 1. So this is really that cluster I was talking about. If I look at the nodes, I can see that I have that cluster running those 3 worker nodes that we've seen earlier. So on the right side, let me quickly start a watch to look at the kube system namespace, which is where I'll be installing both the operator and Portworx. There we go. Oh, made some typo there. Sorry about that. There we go. So basically just some AWS stuff running and some default Kubernetes stuff. So now I can paste the commands to install the operator, and that will install the operator in the kube namespace. We should see it getting started. There we go. So the thing that the operator does, it waits for a storage cluster custom resource definitions to be created on the Kubernetes cluster, and as soon as it sees that definition, that object, basically deploys Portworx according to the specification in that custom resource definition. Let's go back to the second step. I could just apply this long line of text, but what I'm doing now is I'm actually downloading the custom resource definition just to show you what it is. It's a storage cluster of core openstorage.org type. It's being given a name. We specified it installs in kube system. The version of Portworx is there, and here we also see the specifications of the drives that we're using for our AWS cluster. So if I take this and I copy that onto my jump host, let me just quickly paste that into my storage cluster YAML file. There we go. What I can do now is basically kubectl apply this cluster storage object to my cluster. And then the operator will pick that up and basically start installing Portworx according to the specifications. We will see several pods spinning up. The ones that are actually running the storage part of Portworx are the ones that start with the cluster name. And as you might recall, I called my cluster px-deploy. So these 3 pods are the 3 pods running on the worker nodes that will actually provide storage into the cluster. Now we'll give that a few seconds to start up, and then in the meanwhile, we'll type in the command to start logging what's happening inside that cluster. And as one of those clusters is coming up, I'll just wait for the first one to come up. We can basically see what's happening inside of the cluster. And we should be able to see that it's actually reaching out to AWS, creating the volume and starting up. So this one has gone into a running state of some sort. So let's trail the installation. We can see it's now downloading our enterprise Portworx image, which will take a little bit of time. Here we can see that it's creating a container image from Portworx Enterprise 2.8, which was the version that we've specified. And now it's basically starting our Portworx installation. Now, once Portworx starts within this container, it actually sees that it doesn't have any local storage, but it also sees that it's running on AWS, so it can actually reach out to AWS to create those drives that are needed to install Portworx. Right, and now we can see that it's trying to find the local drives here, but it didn't find any drive. So the next thing it's doing, it's basically creating a volume and starting to attach that volume into my worker node. So normally we should see that the drive is now being attached. It successfully attached that drive, and basically it can use that drive to start our pool. So we've just created one pool by creating that drive. That's now benchmarking. So if we go back into our AWS console and basically take a look at one of those nodes and take a look at the instance, for example, we see that once this has finished loading, if we go into the storage section of that node, we can see that aside from the operating system that was already there from the deployment, Portworx has just created that new 170 gig drives, right? It was just created a minute ago and attached into that worker node. Basically, that's what we'll see for all of these worker nodes to happen, is that they will get those additional drives added to their storage footprint. There we go. And for this one, we also see the second drive, which is used to store the etcd database, has also been added. So if we go back to our installation, we can also see that Portworx is now reporting healthy. And if we look at the right side, we see that the 3 worker nodes are all in a 3/3 state. So basically all of them are running. Now, if we want to get the actual status of the Portworx cluster, I can execute into one of these worker nodes and basically run our pixie-cuttle command directly from those pods. So for that, I'll use kubectl exec-ti and then execute into the pod in the kube system namespace. And I'll just bash into that. Once I'm in the pod, I can run the Portworx command from the opt pwx bin directory, and I could execute a pixie-cuttle status. And if I look at that, I can see that my cluster is actually up and running. It's healthy. All of the 3 worker nodes in the clusters are healthy, and I have my pool of storage available to use. So that's it. That's installing Portworx on EKS. That's how simple it is. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.